All right. Well, welcome everyone to the very first edition of Horse Wisdom for Humanity. This is a new series, discussion series that I'm creating that's actually based on the title of my book that I'm writing that's going to be out in February 2022, Horse Wisdom for Humanity. And once the book is published, this discussion series will be a way, well, I'll invite people to come and join me for deeper discussions about the chapters and the topics that I introduce in the book. But I'm doing this sort of preliminary three-part series, three-episode series before the book is launched, really because I've gotten so obsessed with some of these ideas from the book now that I've been writing it and working on it, that I find myself wanting to apply them to like all kinds of things that I'm thinking about. And lately, I've been thinking a lot about just with the craziness that's going on in our world. And I find myself feeling, I guess the best word is disillusioned a little bit with all the ways that humanity and Americans particularly use the ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, kind of these American ideals, and almost like they get twisted into all kinds of different, to justify different types of behavior and feelings and beliefs and attitudes. And I find it frustrating sometimes, and I'm sure many people do, right? And so in order to sort through that, I was like, let me see if I can apply some of the horse wisdom for humanity topics and ideas and concepts to this and see if I can sort through it, right? And it was, I thought it was very helpful to me. So I wanted to just like come on and introduce it and talk with some other folks about it. So I've got two women who are here with me right now live. We might have a couple others who might join. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves real quickly, just so you know who's here. And then I'm going to launch into a little bit of this discussion. So tonight in the first episode, we're talking about life, the first one of the American ideals, and like what is sort of the meaning of life or the right to life, like that whole concept and idea, and how would the horses, what wisdom can they bring to us when we think about that particular topic? So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And I've got with me, I've got Peggy Norwood Stella.
Yeah.
And so Peggy, go ahead and introduce yourself real quick.
Yeah, I'm Peggy Norwood Stella. I am a huge lifetime lover of horses and all things horse. I was one of those kids that just kind of grew up with that natural love for the animal. And that's just kind of stayed with me throughout my life. And then I think over the past, over the past 10, 20 years, I've really been able to kind of explore more with an adult, as an adult. And at the same time, I've become really, really fascinated with the relationship between humans and horses, and then how I see it reflected in my lifetime work of people and their relationships with their bodies. And I just see such an enormous similarity between the two. So I'm always fascinated. That's why I'm just anxious to hear your viewpoint, the wisdom of the horses for humanity. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Peggy. Yeah, and Peggy and I have some other stuff we're collaborating on that's going to be really exciting coming up here. Yeah. All right. And then I've also got Caroline Miller with us. So Caroline, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, I too am all about horse and have been a horse person my whole life. And I just love seeing how you, Kim, relate everything back to a viewpoint through the horse, that perspective, and looking through that eyeglass. And so whenever something comes up to look at the world and through the wisdom of the horse, I know that you're the person to listen to, because this is your mission. And so it's really fun to hear the ideas and contemplate them. And I'm just always excited to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Caroline. All right. And so I want to just say up front, like, you two know this, but others who watch it may not. Like, what does it mean when I say I'm passing on the wisdom of the horses? Because obviously I'm not the horses. I can't speak to them, directly. I'm not an animal communicator in that regard. But what I do, how I communicate with the horses, how I access what I call their wisdom. And this is what I did when I went out to talk to them, or commune with them about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, is I will just go out into the pasture with my horses and into their space and into their calm energy and sit in the pasture with them. And I'll just kind of put out what it is. Like, I remember this one, I went out and I sat and I really just said, like, talk to me about this life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness thing, right? Like, just something that simple. And then as I sat with that, and then I just get quiet, right? And I get meditative and try to clear my mind and just see what wisdom drops in when I'm in that space of quiet stillness with them in their community and in their herd. And with that one, I then broke it down into these three parts, because for me, my logical brain, I wanted to make sense of that. So I asked it, like, talk to me about this life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness thing. And then I said, well, no, wait, let's talk about life first, right? Help me put this in perspective, this right to life thing, this that we can twist into all kinds of ways in America. And let's talk about that. So as I sat in stillness after, putting that out there, I'm gonna kind of go through what dropped in for me. And for me, it's horse wisdom, but also horses are sort of my conduit to the wisdom of the natural world, is really what this is about. And the horses are my conduit to that. So the first thing that came to me was, you have to strip away everything that's purely human. Everything about that, when you're thinking about life and the meaning of life or the right to life, the purely human layers, like the religious beliefs, let's just take those and put them aside. Political affiliations, political motivations, agendas, even like human philosophies, to the extent that we can. Like, sometimes we can't separate completely, but to the extent that we can, let's just put all of that aside, because that stuff is all, humans are the only living beings, living entities, forms of life that have religious beliefs and political affiliations and agendas and human philosophies, right? So their wisdom was, let's just set that aside. And let's look at it aside from all of that. And what I landed with after that is that the physical manifestation of life and the energy of life, those were kind of the two things that came forth after that. The physical manifestation of life, which is life in physical form, everything from a single cell organism to human being, to a tree, whatever, any form of life, there's a physical manifestation of that life, a physical form that the life takes. And then there's the energy of life. And what dropped in for me was that those are two separate but really intertwined things. And then, so the physical form of life, which is something that I think we can all agree on, because we all see, and we all see it. It's there, it's tangible, we all experience it, and we all know that every physical form of life has a beginning, right? Might be a birth, could be a hatching, the different ways that things form life, a seedling that sprouts, it could be a sprouting, but a beginning of life. Then there's the middle, which is while we are in the physical form of life. And then there's an end, which we usually refer to as death, right? So every form of life has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So that's what dropped into me, that's universal. And I think pretty much everybody would agree that that's true, or at least as true as we can know it to be. The energy of life is the other aspect. And that one's a little bit harder to, we don't see it or feel it, or it's not as tangible as physical life. But what we can then do is look to science a little bit, which is a human thing, but still, it's kind of the only thing that I have to go on there. And what dropped into my mind then was the law of thermodynamics. And that is that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It's only converted from one form to another. So the physical manifestation of life has a beginning and an end. It can be from anything. Some forms of life live for 1 second or less. That's their whole, it's like birth, middle, and death all happen that quickly. And then there's others, you think of some trees that live hundreds and hundreds of years, or thousands of years even. So it doesn't matter how long the life is, but every physical form of life has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The energy of life goes on, right? It just takes different shapes and different forms. It never dies. I don't know how it came to be. I don't know the answer to that. I didn't get that wisdom from the horses. Was there ever a beginning of the energy of life? Or I didn't really get anything concrete about that. It was just, there's the energy of life and then there's the physical form of life. Okay, so I'll bring this up because even though I said set religious thoughts aside, there's also this potential, when we get to the meaning of life, there was a little bit that came in that was like, maybe there's this aspect of a potential spiritual higher intelligence form of life. And I'm going to circle back to that about where that came in the meditation. But let's go back to the physical form. So each of us is a species, right? And we're also an individual or a form of life. But let's talk about animals and humans. We're each a species. And every form of life and every species has a unique role that we play in the larger system and cycle of sustainable life. So just by being alive, each form of life, each being that is alive, is playing its evolutionary and biological role or purpose just by being here. So humans have 10,000 types of microbes that live on our body or in our body. Like we have a lot of things that live on our skin, and we have a lot of bacteria and other things that live in our gut, right? So just by being alive, we are playing a role in the larger cycle of life. We're hosting life for other forms. Mosquitoes may bite us, and we're feeding them from our blood when they bite us. So we are playing. All we have to do is just exist as living beings, and we're serving the basic purpose that is ours for the larger cycle of life. Here, I'm going to maybe mute Peggy because I think there's a sound there. There we go. So just by being alive, right, we are living that purpose. And in addition to the forms of life that are kind of hosted on our body and in our body, we're also breathing, right? So we're taking in oxygen that the plants put out. We're breathing out carbon dioxide. The plants are taking the carbon dioxide in. So just by existing in our physical form of life, we don't have to do anything else. We are serving a very valuable purpose in the larger cycle of life on Earth, right? That was kind of like when I sat with that, I was like, huh, that feels so good to me. Which is just like, let all the other stuff go and to be like, that's all I got to do. Like that was what the horse's wisdom was, kind of like, you make this so complicated. You put so much stuff on top of it, where like the real purpose of life is to be alive, right? And to feed the larger cycle of life. So that was one aspect. And then that got me into death. Death is the other part that's universal. And death actually feeds the larger cycle of life as well. And a lot of people don't like comfortable talking about this part of it, but I've been through, you two both know, the deaths of a couple of my horses, and that whole experience, a very visceral experience of that, and saw how the horses respond to death, which certainly they grieve, and it has been a big transition, and it causes a lot of transition, and there were emotions for the horses, but not the kind of stuff that we put on death. They didn't seem afraid of it. They don't live as if they're worrying about it every day. It's just part of life. And if you think about the natural world, and I run into dead bugs, dead insects, dead plants all the time. Like death is everywhere in the natural world. And we only get upset really about our own deaths or deaths of other humans, or maybe our beloved pets, but there's death around us all the time that we're not really having an emotional reaction to, right? And I think that's how most of the natural world approaches death, is it's around us all the time. Although if it's if it's individuals and other life forms that are immediate to our lives, it does affect us, and we do have emotions about it. But there's so much stuff that we put on it, religious stuff, fears, traumas, all the things about don't talk about it. We just add a lot of things to it in the human world that don't really exist with it in the animal and natural world, I don't think. But there's this whole, I get fascinated. There's the science nerdy part of me about like what happens. So we decompose, right? Bodies decompose, animal, plant, human bodies decompose. And so what happens is one of the first things that happens is our immune system stops functioning pretty early on after our body dies, or through the death process. And what happens, I've read about this, so this didn't come to me for the horses. I came back and I was like, I need to research a little bit more about this. So I use the wisdom from the horses, and then it leads me to what other things I want to see, what I want to explore a little more, because I want to understand it. My human scientific mind wants to understand it. But when our immune system stops functioning, then all those microbes that are in our gut that we use that keep us balanced, right, and keep us healthy, start to take over other areas of the body. That when our immune system is working, the immune system keeps them from going places they're not supposed to in the body. Most of the organs of the body don't have a lot of bacteria in it, but the gut does. But what happens is then the immune system stops functioning, and those bacteria start going into other parts of our body, things start decomposing. There's a clock to it, like the process of decomposition. And this is what like forensic scientists and others use to determine, when was the time of death or the cause of death. It's like at what state of decay or decomposition is a body. You can learn a lot about how long the body has been dead. They call it the microbial clock, right? And we all get squeamish talking about a lot of this stuff, but this is just the way. We shouldn't be squeamish to talk about this stuff, because death is universal in all of life, and every living thing goes through some process of this. It's actually a very beautiful process of recycling and regeneration. And that's kind of what came through from the horses, was that this is not a process to be afraid of. The death part is part of the process of life. And so that process starts to feed new parts of life right then. Like there's different insects, there's different vultures and scavengers, meat-eating animals, everything from flies, maggots, beetles, mites, ants, wasps, spiders. All these things are part of the decomposition process. And so the death of one being feeds other life. And whether we like to think about it or talk about it, when we are feeding ourselves, we are eating plants and animals that, well, sometimes the plants haven't passed yet. That we may be just eating portions of them. That's what their life is about, is producing. So we don't necessarily kill all the plants that we eat, but we do kill some of the plants that we eat. So we're part of that process, even though we're removed from it these days, we go to the grocery store and buy our food. We don't really, we're not as in tune with the whole recycling process that goes on in sustaining our own lives. So there's that part of death. And then as the body, purges fluids and all of that through the decomposition process, that provides nutrients back to the soil, right? And I found this is again, adding a little science in, but I thought it was kind of interesting that every kilogram of dry body mass, whatever kind of animal it is that's dying, releases about 32 grams of nitrogen, 10 grams of phosphorus, 4 grams of potassium, and 1 gram of magnesium back into the soil, right? So it's feeding the earth again. And to me, that's beautiful too, to know that death isn't just the end. So I'm letting Jenna in, she's just coming in. Death isn't really the end, right? It's part of this larger, like we all want to be part of something that's larger than ourselves, right? But we never think that thing, we think about some human cause that's larger than ourselves. No, let's talk about this cycle of life that even without doing anything else, just by living and being born, living, and then dying, we are fulfilling a very big part of the purpose of life. Whoops. Okay, Jen, I'm going to go ahead and mute you, but welcome. Okay, so death is the ultimate form of recycling. This is the other part that came message from the horses. And again, back to their overall message here was that we're making life really, really way more complicated. And in some ways, by doing that, we're totally missing the point of life. And this is where a little bit of the spiritual aspect came in, where I'm not quite sure. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about this after we talk about it. But so it's kind of like, well, what's the purpose still, right? So there's this ongoing energy of life, and there's these physical forms of life, but why? Why are there physical forms of life? I sat with that too. I was like, I still want to understand that. And it was, what came to me was kind of like this idea that, say the energy of life is some sort of, other than, I'm putting human words to it because the concepts are so nebulous. I don't even really know how to share them with you, but maybe higher intelligence is the closest thing I can think of. That if the energy of life is a higher intelligence and it wants to understand, just wants to understand, then having a physical form, the only way to understand, like, what is touch? Touch, what does it feel like to be touched or to touch something else? You have to be in a physical form for touch to even have that experience, right? If you're not in a physical form, if you're just air or whatever, there's no touch. So you have to be in some kind of physical form to experience what touch feels like, or to experience, like, what does the warmth of the sun feel like? What does the cold of freezing or snow feel like? To have those concepts understood, again, concepts, talking about really nebulous stuff here, but that the idea is that the various physical forms of life feed information back to higher intelligence. So that the experience of being alive in a physical form as a human is both the same and different than being alive in the physical form of a horse. The experience of seeing, our eyes see the world different than a horse's eyes see the world, different than a dog's eyes see the world, or bears, or lions, or fishes. The experience of living on land is different than the experience of living in the ocean or in the sea, is different than the experience of flying through the air. So there's all these different forms of life that are experiencing different aspects of being in a physical form. I don't know if this is making sense, but this is what was coming to me, is almost like the point of having physical life is that's the way to explore what is physical life. So the point of it is to use our bodies, our physical forms that our life energy is living in during however long we're here, is to experience what being alive in that physical form, all the things we can experience to that. It is the purpose of life that I got from them, was to experience, right? And I kind of asked also about, like, we have all these fears about humanity is just destroying everything, right? We're destroying the world, we're destroying the earth, we're destroying other species. And what I got back from that was that no, we aren't that powerful. We can certainly do things that are affecting our own life experience and other life experiences. We have a lot more emotion that we put into that, around that. I think other animals that are affected by the things we've done, whether climate change is real or whatever, and we are, well, I believe it is, but I'm trying to get away from the human beliefs of, like, just whether you believe that or not. So changes to climate are affecting us and are affecting many other species, but most species are just living the experience of what that is. So regardless of what happens in the world, there's this ongoing cycle of this never-ending cycle of, like, experiences. It never ends. Whether we're having the most horrible types of climate change and heat, whatever, that is a lived experience that passes information back. In other words, we can't end it. We can't end life. Humans can never do anything that will end life. We could certainly, I guess, make decisions that end our species' ability to live here, but the earth will regenerate, the earth will rebalance. And that sort of this purpose of, other thing that came was maybe purpose. The only other thing of, like, purpose was balance, this natural balance, and things get out of balance and then they'll have to be rebalanced. And we can be part of, most of the natural world is, it evolved, right, to be in balance. And we know that humans have done quite a lot of imbalancing, right? A lot of the things we're doing are throwing things out of balance. But the message I got back was, we can choose to be part of the rebalancing. So we can look at the wisdom of the horses in the natural world, which is like, we're supposed to be part of this natural cycle, and there's a balance to it, and there is a rhythm to it. And our role is to be part of it, not to be separate from it, but to be part of it. We can't live without other living organisms, other living forms of life, and we're part of that process. If we get too far out of balance, the overall will recorrect, right? Whether we're part of that solution or not. And maybe higher consciousness is like humans, we're at a point now, I think, where we've recognized that we are causing imbalance. So we have a choice. Like we can choose to realize that imbalance is bad for us. Earth will go on, life will go on, the energy of life will go on. We may be part of it or we may not. If we would like to be, the gift of human consciousness is we can make that choice of saying, I understand now. Like, I think maybe early on in humanity, we didn't understand so much that the consequences of some of the things we were doing. I think now we understand there's consequences. And so we can choose to or not. Life itself doesn't really care, I don't think, whether we figure it out or not. If we don't, that will probably be information that feeds back to this higher intelligence. Maybe the next version of humans, human 2.0, whatever evolves next, maybe we'll be wiser. Maybe there'll be, I think there is like evolutionary intelligence that gets passed down in DNA. The human species is relatively young compared to a lot of life on Earth. So we could still be in an evolutionary stage. I did definitely get from the horses that they wish, maybe all of the natural world wishes, that we would just simplify. We would just remember that we're part of this natural process and balance. And we don't have to add all this other stuff on it that we have. I'm not sure how we unravel ourselves from that, frankly. And maybe you find it comforting, or maybe you don't, that the natural world will rebalance itself even if we don't. And perhaps if that's what's happening for humanity, then again, I think it's even more important that we get back to, we've still served a purpose. Humans and humanity, Homo sapiens, have, regardless, even if we wipe ourselves out, we have still served a purpose in feeding the larger cycle of life, right? Like I said, every individual, by being alive, we are feeding life. We're hosting life on our bodies, we're hosting life in our bodies. And when we die, we will continue to feed the cycle of life. That's not something to be, to see as a failure, right? It's us passing our own judgment on what we're doing and how we're becoming. That's not to say we shouldn't try to do better, but I didn't get that the natural world or even the horses are as concerned as we are about us being able to destroy things. That it's all just, it is. And right now we're alive, and we all should be present with the life that's around us, that we're able to live in and experience. And if we're too worried about all the things that are going to happen, we're not engaged in our experience of life fully, the physical experience of life. Like, we're up here and we're not, the gift of physical life is that we get to experience life through our senses, through our physical senses. And if we're too much in our head, we're not actually experiencing that at all. So that's a lot of stuff. I'd love to hear kind of your feedback on any of it. Agree, disagree, makes sense, doesn't make sense, comforting, not comforting. I would just love to hear what your immediate responses are to some of that got downloaded from the horses for me. Who wants to share first? All right, Peggy. Can you unmute? It's telling me to ask you to unmute, so I'm asking to unmute.
I can do it.
There you go. Hey.
There
Okay.
we go. It was like the little prompt was there and there it's not. Okay. My technology challenge for that. Yeah, I guess what I was just what I was just thinking about in terms of, when our purpose physically, and that we're we're perpetuating the cycle of life. But we'll go back to what you said earlier when there's that energy piece.
Mm.
And I actually think as human beings, we have a sense of, we actually are kind of operating on a plane where we are concerned about that energy piece and how are we impacting life energetically. So that's why I guess I was seeing that we do know what the impact is, of what humans are doing in the world to the physical world.
Mm.
But there's also that aspect of what are we doing to that, what's that energetic piece, and how are we influencing or impacting that energetic piece. So that's what
Yeah.
what came up. That's what just came up for me.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think, so putting myself back in the pasture about some of the things that I was getting. And it's hard to even articulate this, but it was kind of like our experience of life as humans will be better if we get into that energetic balance. The energy of life that is, it kept coming back to this word of balance, which you and I have talked about too. Like there's, in humans, I often get caught up in this, like, oh, it's good or bad, it's good and evil. And that wasn't at all. Like I really that wasn't it at all. There's not good and evil, there's balance. And it's this like the natural life will rebalance. And can we be part of understanding that balance is the goal, and recognizing what out of balance is, and they were kind of saying like connecting back to the natural world is what will show us what that balance is. Like we can't look just within ourselves and our human society to figure out these answers. Separating ourselves from this cycle of life that we're part of isn't the answer. That was the other big thing. Reconnecting, rebalancing, reintertwining is the answer for our own experience of life, right? We're concerned about what we're doing to the energy. Again, the message I really got, which is kind of like, it's not to say like it doesn't matter what you do. They weren't so much saying that, as they were saying it's all going to be okay. Like you can't destroy everything. Like you don't have that much power, right? It was that of like too much ego there. Like you can't destroy everything, but not that what we do doesn't matter. It was really like, they were just like, you're way complicating things. You're way out of sync. Come back to nature, come back to balance. And thinking about taking all those human things out of it. I think that initial message they said of take religion, take politics, take human philosophy, just take all that off, take culture off, and let's just look at life. And I think we come back to that sense of being in balance, when we take all those things out. It's up to us. I think we've created this problem for ourselves by creating all that stuff. The natural world is not responsible for helping us figure out how to untangle from that. We have to figure that out. Yeah. But yeah, I'd love to hear more about how the energy of that.
But the answer, so when I'm coming back to, but the answer is in that natural world, is in life itself, is in that physical life itself. So that connection to that physical life is the balance that you seek, or is the being that we seek.
Well, because, and if you think about, like I said, everything has beginning, middle, end. If it's all going to end, we all know we're all going to die. Why are all these things we're getting worked up about? Why do they really matter? Right? We've put too much weight into all that stuff. And so if we get back to the fact that we all live, we're all born, we all live, no guarantee. There's this right to life. That they were kind of laughing about that right to life. Like if you're alive, you're alive. For as long as you're going to be alive, like, right? Like we think we all have a right to a certain quality of life or a certain length of life. And that was almost like what I got back was, that's humorous. Like that just makes no sense. You're alive until you're not alive, and be alive while you're alive. And then when you're not, you feed the larger cycle of life. Like I don't think they even really could get why that's that right to life, or right to a quality of life, or right to a certain length of life just doesn't make any sense in the natural world, because death can come at any time. It can come from natural causes. It can come from predation. It can come from disease. The point is, while you're alive, be present. And that's really in the physical, be present in the physical experience of being alive.
In the physical, yes. Yeah.
Right. Now, we also can think about it, but it's almost this cyclical thing. And hopefully we're learning that's got to be in balance too. Just because we have the abilities to think and to have free will and all this, whatever parts of us that are different, doesn't mean we have to use it in the ways that we've been using it. We've sort of lost using a lot of other things. We don't use our intuition as much. We don't use our gut. We don't use our senses the way that we could, right? We rely mostly, almost all, on our mental and cognitive and language skills. Yeah.
That being, and then, so you're saying that is the disconnect that's the disconnect from physical life, from actually, that is our disconnection of not actually, being present into the physical world.
Yes. And even that you talked about the energy of life. When we're with horses, it's easy to think about this. They don't speak our language. We are capable of speaking the language of energy with horses. We are capable of speaking the language of energy with each other, of body language, with other forms of life. We do it with dogs. I do it with my pig. We talk to our dog. Like, some animals can do language too, but within humans, within our own species, we sort of separated ourselves out, and we rely primarily on that. And we don't, that's out of balance. That's a way of being out of balance. Yeah. We rely too heavily on it, kind of. Yeah. Caroline, you have any thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts. I got so stuck in the beginning with the decomposition piece and about cremation. And then if we were actually in a coffin, would we ever go back to Earth and all that?
I love it. I looked all that up. So we can talk about that a little. Because brain is just like mine. I was like, yeah, well, we've messed everything up because we embalm ourselves and we put ourselves in coffins. What I've discovered was that even an embalmed body does decompose eventually, and depending what kind of coffin we're in, how long it takes to decompose can be different. It does, again, separate us from the natural cycle completely. All right. And also, like, even I had always thought of like cremation, and then the ashes get spread, and maybe that goes back to natural. Well, when I looked up that really about cremation, what most of that ash that we get back is the bone ash. And bone is the only part of our bodies, or of bodies, that does not decompose. It's too much calcium. It's like rock. That's why bones can be found forever. So they actually said that, like, if you spread ashes from someone being cremated, that's not good for the soil. It's actually bad for it. Except now there's some groups that make these urns that are decomposable urns that are supposed to balance out the pH of that, so that if you do bury it, it doesn't hurt the environment. Like, we make this so complicated, right?
Oh, wow. Right.
But anyway, Caroline, yes, I went to the same place.
Yeah, so that once I was like, get off that so I can keep listening, because I got stuck in there for a while. But the thing that I'm thinking that this is bringing up for me is that when you were talking about the rebalancing, that nature's going to rebalance anyway. I mean, I feel like everything you said, nothing was new in terms of the concepts, which of course, it's just coming from a little bit of a different perspective and hearing it a different way. And what that channeled for me was that the earth already is rebalancing, and that's what climate change is. And the thing that it's causing us to rebalance is get more in touch with nature, because we can't not, because nature is impacting us in a way that we can't not interact with it. And so, that's sort of scary, but also heartening in some ways too, because because I think my biggest personal worry, or that's a wrong word, but angst or something about life is that it took, I just turned 69 and I'm just now feeling like I have some sort of little grasp on, balance and energy and all of that. And I think, and I'm a recovering alcoholic too. So, all those years that I was just fucking around and screwing up my life. And I think, well, that's what most people my age, or when I was that, are still doing, but now technology makes it even worse. But so I get very frustrated that it takes so long, what I'm thinking, how to get to this place. And then I thought, well, nature is going to make a lot younger people be impacted because of what's happening out there. And the only, not the only good, there's good, and as you said, there's no good and bad so much, but what I see is that brings people together. So that's very consciousness raising, because every natural disaster, or every, hurricane or every volcano or every whatever brings out on some level the best of humanity and makes us more human and brings us closer to nature. So anyway, that's all not fully formulated, but that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, that's a lot of really great stuff there.
Yeah.
And yes, I think you're absolutely right. It helped me look at climate change differently, as not so much good or bad as rebalancing. And it's going to the rebalancing is going to be ugly for a lot of life on Earth right now, but we're also not responding to it in a very smart way. So if we know that the oceans are rising, if we know that more severe hurricanes are hitting the coasts, if we know that there's fires in certain areas, if we were smart, we would be looking at how do we work with that, right? How do we don't have to live in those same places. We don't have to rebuild, right? We don't have to rebuild New Orleans every time it gets destroyed, but that's what we're doing. Like we're denying, we're living in resistance to what is, and that's not the natural way. In a fire area, animals, will try to escape it. Some will get, killed in a fire, but that area of the earth is devastated. Life isn't going to be, certain types of life aren't going to be sustained there. They'll move somewhere else where there is food that they can eat until that form of life regenerates in its own way, right? We think we lay claim on these parts of the earth that we think are ours, and Mother Nature, how can she destroy that? We're going to build it back, instead of working with what's happening. Which, if we would work with what's happening, I have a feeling that, as you said, we would be part of the rebalancing. But when we're fighting it, we're making ourselves miserable more than anything by beating our heads against this wall again and again and again, and spending so much money, effort, and time working against it. Hi, Jenna. Would you like to join? I know you came in late, but I'd love to hear if you have any comments so far, or introduce yourself.
Yes, hi. It's so good to meet you, Kim. I followed your writings and stuff on Facebook now for a while, and
I know.
have so much appreciation for, that you're seeing these things. You write beautifully from the heart and have this lovely connection with the horses. So I really...
Right back at you.
Oh, thank
Yes.
you. And this is my dog, Mira. I just got home. I was out with the horses and I got a little bit delayed. They had a miniature there who came up really lame. So everything, gets thrown off, which always seems to be my life. I'm like, I can't keep a clock when you're mostly out in the pasture, there's just...
Well, that fits right into this. Like, clock keeping is our own human thing, right? That is not how the natural world functions.
It is. No, the natural world is based on, you know, a lot of immediacy and making our choices on where we are present, and then turning towards something else as, you know, as we're able. So thank you for your grace for that. And I just want to say, I think that this is beautiful, you know, conversation that's happening. And what it sounds to me is just this real clarity coming of words I've heard that resonate for me. So I sometimes use them as this: humanity is being given an invitation through this imbalance, through the suffering that we're seeing in ourselves and what we're creating for them, the animals to experience, for the earth, the waterways, the forests, the air, the suffering. So there's this imbalance that is calling us to remember our place in the circle of life in a way that then, yes, restores the balance that comes when we're in that harmonious place, recognizing that this is life. Like, you know, you've said, I think so beautifully, like, this is life, and we get disconnected from that because we're so caught up in these human constructs of how to live, how to strive, how to interact, how to succeed, how to gain, how to stockpile, whatever it is. And I think it's beautiful that what's coming through here is that the horses are calling us that life is to live and to experience, and to know that we're experiencing it together, right?
I was just gonna say, like, I love that your dog is right there, because it gives such a perfect picture. Now I know I'm talking, so on the screen they're not seeing it, but your dog is just being present with, I'm with you right now. We're together.
Yes.
We're being, yes.
Together. She's like, you were gone and now we're returned. And I think too that that's another part of what I'm hearing in what you're saying about this higher intelligence that exists. And, you know, we can call it consciousness, we can call it spirit, we can call it a higher power. You know, I mean, there's so many different ways that we've described that. Let's see, did we lose? My screen shifted. So many different words, you know, and like you're saying, it's words just grasp and try, but there's just something beyond words. But for me, what becomes important is that, there's this shared being that is enlivening all of us. And I loved what you said of that, to have a human experience is different than to have a dog experience, a horse experience, a tree experience. But life, this intelligent force, whatever it is that we want to, you know, say it in a word, it's experiencing itself through all of these different forms. Right. And that intelligence is whole. There's a oneness to that, an infinite existence that's beyond the form of existence here. And then in the experience as an individual being, not only is it meant for experience, like you said, to feel the air on us, on our skin, to touch, to sing, to hear song, all of this beauty that we get to experience. For me, it's also very important to name that life is also trying to meet itself through the different forms. So it's a reunion. It's a way of being able to see life through another being. And we call that often love. We call that compassion. We call that connection. We call it, you know, I'm so happy to see you. I'm so happy you're here. You know, whatever that might be, like you were saying with Mira, just being like, okay, we're together. There's that togethering that life wants to do, not just have experience, but have experience together, and to know sort of that seeing heart to heart or eye to eye. I think that is also important for me to, you know, name. And I heard it implicitly in what you're saying already. Like that's there, because I think those of us who love horses, there's something about them that I think brings us very fully to that place. And I just, I want to name that as some kind of a reunion or a recognition, a being together in a particular way. So
that's a beautiful component of it. Yeah. And again, like this challenge of finding the words to describe things that I don't think really, I think language is so limited, but yes, we recognize other life forms,
Mhm.
right? There's that recognition of that's alive. And
Mhm.
if you really take time to get present out in nature, is also just like noticing all the life. We walk through our lives. I remember when I first realized that the crows on my farm were like noticing when I come out of the house and talking to me and following me around, and I was like, it never even occurred to me that like the natural world is paying attention and cares, like, oh, you're outside, like you're part of this too. And we don't even think about that. And sometimes when I sit in my pasture and I'm quiet with the horses, and I live in kind of a hood, so you can hear things, and you get quiet and you start noticing everything. Oh, that
Mhm.
neighbor down the street, way down there, came out their door, right? And I think the natural world is watching us and paying attention and like noticing everything about us. And we're not noticing most of the time much of anything. But that is what life's about, is this, it's all connected, right?
Mhm.
Part of that balance. And we're missing out. I think that was the big thing I kept getting from the horses, is this almost like sadness of like, y'all are just missing, you're missing it. You're so busy.
Right.
Mhm.
And out of
Yeah.
that disconnection, then we have the capacity to get so imbalanced, because when we're connected, then that rebalancing, it starts to happen very naturally.
It does.
We're attuned. You saying that about the crows, I love that, Kim. It reminds me, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I took my gelding through some forest areas that are on the stable lands where they live. And some other folks had gone out on a trail ride, and I said, well, I'll walk with him, and we'll kind of see, wherever we meet you, and can maybe walk back together. And there's a lot of deer on the property, and birds, and other kinds of life. And I had the realization, it's like, I know this, I've experienced it before, but there was something just really heightened and profound about being in the midst of it, where I was walking with the gelding, and we heard some deer, and the deer were, hopping through, and they were, obviously the deer noticed us. And then, you could tell that in their awareness of us, they were moving. And, but then we walked a little bit further, and I could hear some birds. There was one hawk in particular who was giving a very specific call sound. And then I could tell that the deer were listening to the hawks, and the hawk was talking to others. And all of a sudden, like, all around us was just teeming with this coordinated intelligence. And I could feel my gelding nudging me, because he was getting a little bit like, okay, there's all this conversation, and we're only paying attention to this bit because you're telling me we got to go here, go like this, drop your head, do this, do that. And he's like, I've got it. I'm way more connected. Who do you think you are?
Right.
Telling me how I'm going to make my way through this wooded area with you. And it was just great humbling of, oh my gosh, I am the novice in this forest. And here I have been taking, the lead, knowing that there's, like you said, are we even aware of how much is going on?
And that all takes me back to what Caroline said about the rebalancing she was talking about in the climate. But like, we almost, in order for the natural world to help us rebalance, they almost have to take away all the things that we're distracting ourselves with that are keeping us separate from it. So, I wouldn't be surprised if it goes the way of our food system shut down, biology shuts down, like all of this that we have created that separates us, keeps us separated from this balance of life, will eventually get taken down. I mean, I think it's just inevitable that it will happen. And, that doesn't mean like we have to go off the grid right away. But I think, the more that we can, I was even reading about, human history, how we have created our food supply based on like, I don't know what it was, 10 kinds of crops that we were are easy to grow wherever. We've lost a lot of the wisdom of, probably on my farm, there's enough things that are edible that I could just eat that I don't even know what they are. I don't even know what's safe to eat. We've lost a lot of that intelligence, and the natural world could probably help us find it again. If we all had to become like survivalists, I don't know, we would look to the animals to know what's edible, partly. Not that everything they can eat, we can eat, but we would look to the other forms of intelligence to try to help us with what we don't know. Probably. I don't know. Anyway, interesting. Caroline or Peggy, you have any more thoughts you want to add?
Oh my gosh, it just keeps going. What's going on in my head? Because I'm actually just thinking about talking about that when Jenna was talking about the, like this whole system, this whole communication system that was going on around her in that natural world, and as I relate things to the human body, I was like, oh my gosh, it's like we're so unaware that that kind of thing is just going on within our own bodies, like the cells talking to each other and things going on in our bodies that, we're just completely unaware. But if we just tuned in enough, it would be amazing the messages we would be able to get even from our own gut, from our heart. We rely so much on the mind, and yet there's so much information that's flowing through us all the time, and being able to then connect, to be able to connect that, to ground in that, and then be able to connect to the natural world, it would be like a stunning transformation. So yeah, I just get kind of excited listening to it, because I think there's just one, like one thing hooks up with another. I just see so much here. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah. And that takes me to like the solutions are really so much simpler than we think. It's not about figuring out how to fix a lot of this stuff. We can just abandon a lot of stuff. Okay, forget that, and let's just refocus here. Like I think it's a lot easier to get back to the balance than we think. We just have to be willing to let go of so much other stuff and then go, okay, so here we are. Now, where do we go, from here to rebuild in a better way? Yeah.
And the point you were making about fixing, we're literally fixated on fixing. I mean, we as humans think, oh, well, we've messed up that, so now we need to go fix it. And the fact is, it's maybe we just need to leave it, leave it alone.
It's not really broken. It's not really broken.
The need to fix is like so, it's just become so ingrained in us. And if we can begin to let go of the idea of like, we humans don't necessarily need to fix anything, because look, we've already fixed enough. It's just it would be, kind of amazing to sort of let go the idea of we have to fix it, but we do need to, I think we do, solutions are right there in that world, in that natural world, right in front of us, in our bodies and in this beautiful earth of ours. So this is such a, it's a really, highly exciting conversation, and just so many threads coming out from it. So, yeah.
And even if all we take away from it is when we find ourselves getting like caught in the churn, right? Where, oh my God, I'm worried about that. Oh my gosh, that's horrible. That is to just step back outside and go, it's not broken.
Yeah.
It's not broken.
Yeah.
All of that is like, really, I don't need to get so worked up about that. And I know that feels like irresponsible to say, you're just going to walk away from all that. It's not that. It's like, we really can't fix that.
Right.
So why are we going to beat our heads against that wall? I don't know. So to me, sometimes just in terms of my own emotional and mental health and being able to be engaged in the life, is I've got to separate myself from what's just so not working. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And that permission to disengage from it for sanity.
And to be allowed to not fix, right? To allow something else to just be.
We aren't the center of the universe. We aren't.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I love how that conversation allows for letting go of the fixing, letting go of trying to repair systems that already, you know, or things that are in place that aren't working for us. And I think it was you, Peggy, who said, well, and there are solutions, you know, so we can acknowledge we need solutions and drop the fixing at the same time. And that's so beautiful.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And the solutions will emerge with wisdom if we're in this natural home. Yeah.
Well, sustainable life has been going on long before us. It'll go on long after us. Like the solutions are already there. Like, and if we can just realize we are part of it, we are part of that system. It doesn't revolve around us, but we are part of it, and we feed into it, and we can benefit from it, and we can engage with it. But it isn't ours to fix. It's ours to realign with, I guess. Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Yeah, that last statement really hit home. Ours to realign with. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
We got there together. You guys helped me find that right then. And you guys have, I'm glad I'm recording this because I'm definitely going to be listening to this back several times. Beautiful conversation. But yeah, what else is sitting with y'all?
Well, I just want to, so what Caroline said, where highlight that, you know, I would love to see that power of that kind of statement in something that you do, you know, write and bring forth, because that was beautiful. It has power, it has real power. And it's simple. It's so simple. Like you were saying, that we make it so complicated, but that was a simple, empowered statement that can be really powerful medicine.
Right. And that is very much in alignment with what the feeling was from the horses, right? Whether I was articulating the words or not, was just that. Like it's not broken. It's not to be fixed. It's just to real life. I found that word then, right? It's ours to realign with. And we're missing, that's what we're missing. And I think that was kind of the message of like, if there's a purpose or meaning to life, it's to be in alignment with it.
You know, I love that word.
Yeah, I know. Peggy.
My favorite words, align.
Balance, align, it's all coming back up again, right? The same word.
Yeah, it's amazing how that comes up all the time. Yeah.
Now the bigger question, go ahead, Jenna.
I was going to say, somewhere, I think when I was listening earlier, you were keying in on it, so maybe, you know, you have it, like you said, you have it recorded, you can go back. I remember there was some part of the conversation where I was getting the image that what you were conveying is this, that life is constantly inviting us to realign. You know, there's this intelligence that is like, has its own gravity for us to be able to be pulled into alignment with, if we just surrender all of the fighting that pulls us out of balance. There's something in there where you were saying, and I had that mental kind of image of just the vastness of nature holding so much of this wisdom, holding the, you know, the balanced momentum, the harmony, that it's like right here for us to be able to come into the flow with it. There was something you were saying about that. I don't know, just felt like it kind of fit in here, that we can, as we listen, as we slow down, as we simplify, as we kind of stop, you know, and then restart from a place of that deeper connection. The solutions come, and the balance is here. It's, I don't know, for me, my sense, like being in the forest that one day, which is a powerful reminder and an embodied experience of it. And that then hunger of, I want more of this. I want to live this way. I want to bring other people to be able to live, you know, in these moments. It's just so enormous and so big and so intelligent that it like can guide us right into place if we can let it.
Yes. Well, and as you were talking about that, a couple things came to my mind. One is just like, I mean, there's so many times I walk out on my porch and like a little bird will come right up on the porch and then off. And I think, was that an accident or what? Like, and it's like, no, maybe it's trying to get attention, like pay attention, notice, connect, here we are. Like, I stopped thinking that maybe they aren't trying to connect, right? That maybe they actually are. Like, why do we think that? Because that's the way of life, is to connect. But the other was, and I use this a lot in the when I have people in the field and we're joining the herd and we're doing that exercise. It's an exercise that I do where we try to honor the spacing that the horses have between them, and that everybody's always worried the first time they do it that they're going to somehow mess up the energy of the herd, right? Like, I'm going to put myself in the wrong place. And my answer is always, as long as you don't go directly into a horse's personal space, you can't mess up, because if you go here and they're uncomfortable with that, they're going to adjust themselves, right? They've got your back. Like, you can't mess up. Everything will shift to around you. And there's this feeling with people that like, oh, I can't mess up. It's okay. Right. And that is how I feel like this whole thing, even with climate change, is like that with us. Like, we're so afraid we're messing up and we're blaming each other for messing up. And yeah, it's like, yeah, we're out of balance. We've made some bad whatever. I don't even know if the decisions are bad. We've just made decisions and there's consequences. Things shift because of decisions we've made. So let's try different decisions if we don't like the way that shifted. But again, that feeling of, we can't break it. We can't mess it up. Yes, there'll be cause and effect, but this like sense of responsibility that I think is what gets us so worked up and so angry at each other and so pointing fingers, is like, if we can just get past that and realize that it's all about shifting. It's all about rebalancing. And we're not playing the right game. We're not even on the right. We don't know the game. I know game's not the right word. We're on a whole different sheet of music than the rest of the world, which it's not really a very pretty piece of music all the time either. The other getting back with nature is much more beautiful music. So how do we get around that? Like, we've kind of created a situation where humanity is sort of afraid of nature. Like, that we think we can't survive in nature, or we have to separate ourselves from it. Oh, it's really hot. I like my air conditioning. How do we get around this, the things that maybe keep us from wanting to embrace being part of nature instead of being better than or separate from? You have thoughts on how do we, other than, what some of us are doing, which is trying to reconnect people with nature a little bit, getting glimpses of it, but it's still, I think, hard for most people to get their heads around. What does that mean? We move out of our houses and go live in the woods, I think there's probably steps, and there's, it doesn't have to be that extreme. This goes back to what Peggy said, maybe about the energy of life, is can we just start realigning mentally and emotionally with this concept of living in alignment? And I think if we start feeling in sync with that alignment, then we'll start making different choices naturally. If we know that the goal we're after is realignment, but we can make small choices that then turn in over time, generation by generation, into bigger decisions. Do you guys have thoughts about that? I struggle with how to, like, if we can get there mentally that this is good, then what does that actually start to look like for us?
Well, I think one of the things that you said really ties in to this for me is that I think a lot of the disconnect and the reconnection starts with food, starts with how we grow food, what we eat, how we relate to the fact that actually life and the earth are the big providers of our food and sustenance, not a grocery store, not payment systems. It's the apple seeds, it's the soil, it's the water, it's the earth. There's this great provider, and it breaks down that fear of scarcity when we're really with it. I mean, and then it can also accentuate it if the environment is drawing us into, like you said, some food scarcity, some resource problems. I live in Minnesota, and so We have abundant, wonderful growing seasons. I mean, right now my gardens are just teeming with tons and tons and tons, and then there's seeds and seeds and seeds. And so you see this, like, there's no lack, there's just tons of abundance. I have one tiny slice from one part of one watermelon and I've got 50 seeds. I could grow more than could feed my whole neighborhood off of just that. And then we come into winter and it's cold and we don't have access to any, foods unless you drill a hole in the ice and you could get fish or something like that. Or, you really know what to pick that is dormant, like the deer and the birds do. But it lends itself towards this feeling of harvest and this feeling of scarcity. And so I think that then we can explore then how do we get into patterns of greed and fear and separating ourselves from one another through that. So I think that tuning in with our food resources and how we relate to food, what we eat, how that either nourishes our body through being as close to sunlight as it can be, or weakens our immune system. It's really chemically processed and things like that. I think that that's all starting grounds that's very powerful. In addition, I think, to being with the animals and immersed, in natural surrounds, paying attention to the rhythms and the seasons and the moon and all these cycles that guide us. I really think what you were saying about, we've stripped it all down to like 10 foods, and how does that change? I think Peggy kind of mentioned some of that made me think of like our microbiome and what's this information and how are we digesting? And, to me, I think that's a big key.
And that even makes us have to look at, we get on our sort of, I don't want to, kind of ethical high horses sometimes about whether we're going to be vegan or vegetarian or all the things that we think. When it comes to survival in the winter, we might hunt a deer even if we didn't, it's we have to get back to, like, humans obviously evolved to be able to digest both. Of course, certain individuals maybe have their varying degrees of that. Like we all have, like I have gluten intolerance. So, but I think that's something based on what we've done to our food supply. But anyway, but we just wouldn't worry ourselves in the same way with some of these things that we come up with, because we also would have a different relationship with death. And if we hunted to eat, there's that idea of like honoring the death and the life that it provides. And there's a whole different energy to that than there is to our current food supply. So it's our relationship with all the sources that sustain life. And then also acknowledging that there's more, death would be different if we were in more natural. Our deaths would be different. And those deaths would feed other forms of life. And we would see that there's this balance of, like, it's not just us killing other things to eat, but other things feed life off of our bodies too. We're just out of sync of all of that. And we don't like to talk about it. It makes us very, very uncomfortable. And that's kind of sad, that thing that is the most basic to being alive, to being life, is this birth, living, and death, that we don't want to think about it or talk about it. And I think that's the other piece of the food supply. But I think our relationship with death is another one that we really have to work on realigning with. Yeah.
Totally with you on that. Absolutely. And I think a lot of the energy that we expend that draws us away from nature is actually death avoidance. Avoiding coming close to the intimacy with the impermanence, the fleetingness, the uncertainty, the not given,
And that takes us right back to the theme I started with, which is that idea of the right to life, or the right to what? A quality of life, or a length of life. Or I do think, I think the American ideal comes from, a good-hearted place. But the way that we look at what that means, I think life is it. If life exists, we have it. There's not really this right to it, is a weird way to think about it. And so, we kind of have to look at some of these things that we hold up as a given, an ideal, like this is the right way to think about it. And our whole society's built on that, America, right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we'll get to the other two in the other episodes. But yeah, you just took us right back to honor life is to be present in it and live it, and like understand our bodies and what does it mean to live within the human body that I'm in, and how does it relate to all the other forms of life around me. And yeah. And Peggy, that gets right into your stuff with the human body.
Oh boy, I know.
So much about our connection with the human body.
Oh yeah, I've heard align, balance, and connect. I don't know how many times. Like, yeah. So it's, yeah. Oh, it just gets into so much. And this, the human body is just such a lovely symbol and place for understanding, coming to understand. I just wanted to add this, something that just like kind of hit me as you were talking about the weather, talking about hurricanes and tornadoes and fires, and going, wow, it's almost as if nature wants to get closer to us. Like it's like if we're trying to separate ourselves away from nature, or we're exploiting it in some way or separating out. And then now we are more than ever aware of these weather patterns that are just, that some might say infringing upon, our life as we know it. It's like, no, I think nature's just coming to visit us in a little more intimate way. And if we're going to wonder, like, well, what are we going to have to do? We're going to have to coexist. There's no way coming to balance. We can't fix hurricanes, we can't fix tornadoes. It's like, oh, we're just going to have to come to terms with, we're going to have to live with that. And we're going to have to live with nature. And it's almost as if nature's just knocking on the door going, I'm coming for a visit and you're going to pay attention. Right. It's just kind of a different way. And I'd never kind of thought of it that way, of how it's with that severe weather, it's more like just a bigger visit, a closer visit.
A way to get us to notice.
Yeah.
A way to
get us wake up. Yeah.
A wake up. Yeah. That makes me think about one of the ways that I describe, horse behavior when they get into, there's the subtle language. And so I say, by the time a horse is kicking or biting or rearing, like that horse is screaming with its behavior.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like Mother Nature kind of saying, like, there's been lots of signs along the way that maybe building societies, building cities on the coast is the smartest thing to do. Building houses right on the beach, maybe that's not the smartest way to live. And we've been getting that message for a long time. And so now now it's like, okay, you haven't been listening, so I'm going to speak louder, right?
Exactly.
Not that nature has a mind in that way, but I think the balance, it's a response to, we're out of balance. So
there's a balanced response. So yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Interesting. And when I think about like human cognition, our ability, our brains are amazing. If we were to decide as a species that we were going to put our minds to figuring out how to rebalance, I know we could do it. Like, so that's like, maybe it's not wrong that we have these like amazing brains. We're just not putting the brain power in the right direction, right? We're not aligning.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We could totally figure this out because it's simple. It's the attachment. It's the attachment to what is and what we've gotten used to and what we think we believe. Yeah.
And the need to be right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or not admitting we've been wrong. Same thing, really. Beautiful.
Because we've
I was just going to say one thing came up for me about and it's probably really obvious, but when you were talking about air conditioning and the weather, and, we're not in the weather, is that I had this big epiphany when I moved from years of not having winter and coming back to winter, and years of not having humidity and coming to humidity. And, when I was going to do that, my mind was all, like, oh God, I'm probably going to really hate the humidity. And oh my God, I'm going to hate the snow and all this. And then I realized, because it was the same thing that had to happen in the shift of the move, was that all I had to do was tweak my perspective just a teeny little bit, and think about, oh my God, my body's going to love that moisture. And oh, it's going to be so great to be able to actually be indoors for hours at a time so I can get some other things done. Because when you live in California, where I live forever, it's like so hard to do anything indoors because it's so nice outdoors all the time. So as soon as I could start thinking about all the stuff that was good, and it was just this teeny little shift in perspective, but it made, and I've been enjoying the weather since I've been here so much, because every new thing that I wasn't experiencing, I go, what? And Stella, wait, I forgot your name, but anyway, said that the body, Peggy, I'm sorry, bringing it back into your body. I'm a body person too. I think the body has all the answers. And so, like, what is my body telling me it's liking or wanting or needing in this new environment? And it's really brought me so much more in touch with my body, because I shifted climates. Just, so I'm just somehow trying to bring that around to learning. And, of course it's in the body, but being able to actually be aware of what's going on in the body.
Yeah.
We've become so, as a culture, so unaware of, so out of our bodies.
Yeah.
And
So much
your body will know, your body will tell you. Oh, you just have to actually listen to it.
Yeah. There's so much beautiful of what you just said, listening to the body, but also you just switched to an acceptance of what is, right? And that's part of living in the experience of, what our body is experiencing in the physical form, what's around us. Let's not fight it, but like be with it, work with it, right? And embrace the opportunities that are there versus wishing for what, it would be something else. Yeah. That's big. Beautiful. We're at like 8:26, so we're kind of right at the 90 minutes, but if anyone has anything, this was beautiful. I cannot thank you ladies enough. You have deepened my own thinking and understanding about this, and that's exactly what I hope comes out of all of these. And even when the book that I'm putting out, I'm hoping that it gets people's minds started, right? And that the conversations continue. And that's why I want to continue these Horse Wisdom for Humanity discussions, after the book too, is like, it's just to sort of a place to start the conversations and shift some perspectives. So thank you for engaging in this. And I can't wait to post, I'll have to upload this video to YouTube, so then I can post it in Patreon, but I know others there are gonna really enjoy it. And at some point, I don't know, I want to ask permission while you guys are here, if you would be comfortable, if I ever decide I want to share it beyond the Patreon community, nod your head if y'all think that would, or raise your hand if you would be okay with that. Or if you wouldn't, you can send me an email and let me know. But you all, yeah, all of you had beautiful contributions to this conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, let's carry it forward. Have a beautiful evening.
Thank you for initiating.
Yeah.
Initiating us to realign our evenings to be here.
Yes, beautiful. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.